Welcome to Technovation. I'm your host, Peter High. My guest today is Bharat Amin. He's the Executive Vice President and Chief Information Officer of Huntington Ingalls Industries, the largest military shipbuilding company in the United States, as well as a provider of professional services to partners in government and industry, with nearly $9.5 billion in annual revenue. Bharat has held his current role for a bit more than 2 years, and he came to it after serving for nearly 5 as the Chief Information Officer of one of the company's business units. Bharat, welcome to Technovation. It's great to speak with you today.
Glad to be here, Peter.
Well, Bharat, as I mentioned, you are the Chief Information Officer at the global level of Huntington Ingalls Industries. And I wouldn't be surprised if there are some people who are listening to us now who may be less familiar with the organization. I gave just the briefest of overviews of it, but I wonder if you could take just a little bit more time in offering a bit of depth into what the organization does, please.
Yeah, let me just tell you a quick story. Before I was offered the position, 3 months before, I did not know myself who Huntington Ingalls was. So it's great to know. So let me just give you a short brief about Huntington Ingalls Industries, and then give you a little bit of background of our 3 divisions and corporate. So we are now, I know you said largest military shipbuilder, but with an acquisition last year, we are now calling ourselves as a global engineering and defense technologies provider. And of course, like you said, widely known as America's largest military shipbuilder. So that's in short, with 135 years of history of trusted partnership in advancing in U.S. national security, HII delivers critical capabilities ranging from the most powerful and resilient maritime platform ever built, like aircraft carriers, nuclear powered submarines, to unmanned systems and artificial intelligence, machine learning analytics. HII leads the industry in a mission-driven solutions that supports and enables connected, integrated, fully spectrum forces. So like we are supporting, our aspiration is to support Navy's distributed maritime operations. We are headquartered in Newport News, Virginia, and we have a 44,000 strong employee base. Like you said, HII, like you said, not known, we have built 70% of Navy fleet for U.S. Navy. So, that's in itself. We have 3 divisions: Newport News Shipbuilding, which is where I started my first role as a CIO from outside. 25,000 employees, Virginia's largest industrial employer, and we design and build 30 aircraft carriers, and one of the 2 shipbuilders capable of nuclear powered submarine design and construction. Ingalls Shipbuilding is about 11,000 employees, largest employer in Mississippi. Builds 4 classes, and that includes also U.S. Coast Guard and National Security Cutter. And Technology Solutions, this is, again, has grown tremendously since last year's acquisition of Aligned Technology and Science Company. So we serve the national security well beyond shipbuilding in innovative areas ranging from artificial intelligence to unmanned. So we no longer call ourselves just the shipbuilders. We are expanding our advanced technologies to protect, connect, and integrate joint forces. Customers extend beyond Navy, including Army, Department of Energy, and more. And as I said, with recent acquisition, now we deliver full spectrum of solutions in AI, ML, cyber, electronic warfare, unmanned, live virtual constructive training, advanced modeling and simulation, autonomy. So in short, that's what Huntington Ingalls is.
That's a great overview. Thank you for that comprehensive overview of what the organization does. Talk a bit about, if you wouldn't mind, Bharat, your role as Chief Information Officer. What's within your purview?
Yeah, so Peter, my role as a CIO for HII, I'm responsible for company's IT and digital strategic direction, and started with a strong focus on cybersecurity capabilities. Again, as you know, this was a newly created role for HII Enterprise and appointed by CEO, and I report to him in 2020. And now I'm elected officer, and I'm elected by the HII board. So I set the cybersecurity and IT vision, mission, values. I mean, just how, from enterprise perspective, because it's a new role. The company, when it divested 10 years ago from Northrop, it spun up into divisions, and we ran autonomous divisions. So this is the first time we are trying to bring everything together under an enterprise environment. So defining a strategy, a plan for modern enterprise services. This also includes leading our governance and oversight for all our key digital technology partnerships, externally and internally. For example, internally, we've had a digital transformation council, and I'm one of the co-chair. My other co-chair is the COO of the company. We are very few public companies. 2 years ago, when my position was stood up, to have a cybersecurity committee at a board level. And we've been running it now for 2 years. I'm the liaison, the company liaison between the board and HR management. And we've run that for 2 years now. And I'm now working with the CEO, division presidents, and I've centralized my senior team, which includes CIOs and a CISO, and I'll talk more about it later.
Well, that's very interesting. I appreciate that overview as well. To talk a bit more, if you wouldn't, as you just began to allude to it, the structure of your team itself. You mentioned the 3 divisions of the company. You previously led one of those as the CIO. Talk a bit about what is managed centrally at the global level and what's managed at the divisional level of the organization, please, and how your team specifically is structured.
Absolutely. So, Peter, again, everybody knows that when you are in a decentral mode, it's very hard to try and bring, again, our focus was cybersecurity as a start, but we are also now bringing all infrastructure under central approach. So what I had to do initially was to work with the division leadership teams and a COO, where all the division reports into, to think about how we want to manage going from cybersecurity perspective, infrastructure perspective, and what we call it, how we support our division, which is our prime, importance, right? So currently we have about over 800, I would say, employees with about 350, and on top of that, about 350 contractors that supports 2 shipyards, a lot of remote locations from Technology Services Group division perspective, supporting about 44,000 employees. Overall budget is, I would say, roughly about $400 million. It goes in up and down, depend on investments and where we are. Today, reporting directly to me, 3 division CIOs. So I was one of the division CIOs, so I have 3 division CIOs. I used to have 4 CISOs, a corporate CISO and a 3 division CISOs. As of last year, we have centralized that. So I have now 1 CISO, and the division CISOs have taken on enterprise roles, and we have 1 central cybersecurity team. I've created a position of CTO and my enterprise technology services leadership role, and he will be heading all my enterprise technology services infrastructure. And then I have chief of staff also as a program director. So that's my staff. The accountability for cybersecurity and IT is with me, lies with me. I work with the board, the management team in presenting proposals, and the way we deal with it is, so we've started some projects, and I'll talk about it in a bit. That's going to be enterprise-wide, foundational, but we are keeping all, I'm going to say, business-driven things at a division level. Because we want to keep everything we support to division to support their mission. We want to cap. So, for example, ERPs, technical support to the users and all that is at the divisional level. So, centralization at this point is the senior leadership team, so we can drive it. All of enterprise cybersecurity, we are centralizing it. And we have started this program called Digital Defense Modernization, which again, a year and a half ago, I presented to the board and management our zero trust journey. So we are on that journey right now. And once we implement the DDM program, we'll be able to take then things that we want to do at enterprise level, the divisions will decide, the CEO will decide and will support. But our goal is, the way I think about it, business technology needs to be very close to where the business is. And business technology to me is delivering solutions, solving their problems, enabling their mission, et cetera, et cetera. The IT and the infrastructure kind of things, we want to centralize as much as possible. We don't want to have multiple approaches to the cloud, the backends, and et cetera, et cetera. And then operational technologies will also remain depending on the divisions on what they're trying to address. So we are in a mixed mode right now. I would say 80-20 right now, but it will shift over a little bit more towards centralization.
I appreciate that. And what an interesting is, I want to linger for a moment longer on cybersecurity, a topic you've mentioned in a couple of your responses for a good reason. Given the business that you're in, obviously security is of the utmost importance. I can only imagine the complexity of it. Talk a bit about, if you would, especially as a function that you've been standing up and clearly modernizing and et cetera, what sort of framework do you use to gauge the effectiveness of the team's efforts? How do you organize that?
So before the position was created, again, I think the view was we had a corporate CISO, but the board wanted to have a little bit more in terms of strategy and how we would mature our cybersecurity across the company. And like I said, that's when we stood up a cybersecurity committee at the board level. And a long story, I'm going to give you a quick short story. I mean, I was kind of almost ready to retire when CEO told me to take on this role. And say, hey, Bharat, can you serve us to create a cyber maturity, security maturity, create an enterprise environment? And my first cybersecurity committee meeting was in February, I remember 2020. And I told our CEO that I'd already planned to go to South America for vineyard tours. I was retiring, right? So I had to cut short my vineyard tours from Argentina, a one-day short, so I can meet with the cybersecurity committee chairman, who's now chairman of the board, to talk about our first cybersecurity committee. So that was my first foray into how do we run a cybersecurity committee at a board level. When we looked around, looking at the charter and all that, we went to NACD, National Corporate Directors Association. There was not too many stuff out there. So we created a charter. We said, here's what are the things the committee is going to look at. Initially, before my appointment, we were more focused on how are we doing with the vulnerabilities, like operational metrics. And with the committee formation, we focused on 4 areas. We're going to talk about strategy and governance. We're going to talk about compliance, operational metrics, and then what are the internal things that we want to talk about from how we want to run the committee. So my first, as I said, starting was presented a zero trust architecture to the committee, which resoundingly approved it, saying, hey, this makes sense. And I took committee's focus, or we didn't have committee, but board's focus from operational metrics on looking at how much vulnerabilities we have, what are the 30 days, and a maturity to very strategic focus on how are we going to implement zero trust architecture, and what does that do for HII going forward? How are we doing with, you probably know that DoD is implementing this CMMC, cybersecurity capability maturity certification for all defense companies. So how are we going to comply, risk and comply to that? And then when I started, we also implemented this whole phishing simulation that we used to do once a quarter. Now it's once a month. We knew that is one area that the attackers, adversaries, going to come after companies like ours. So those kind of things we started doing. We created internal projects. We looked at what are the programs that we want to have from a threat management perspective, insider threat perspective, et cetera, and that's how we build trust with the board committee now. We just recently in December, last December, we had an external cybersecurity subject matter expert come present to the board in terms of awareness and training, like we do board training. And when she looked at our program, what we have done for 2 years, she was amazed that we were probably one of the best in top 10, has implemented cybersecurity processes with the board, with the committee, and what we're doing. And now, I'm not sitting on that laurels. I'm keep pushing our teams to go forward, and we're going to continue in 2022 with the digital defense modernization implementation.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you for that overview. And I know another area that you and the team focus on is digital innovation, Bharat. And I wonder if you could take a moment and provide some examples of what that constitutes within a setting like HII.
Yeah. So, I'll start off with my journey at HII, starting as a CIO at Newport News Shipbuilding 7 years ago, started in 2015. And when I started, one of the reasons the company went outside to look for a CIO was they wanted to bring in outside-in perspective on digital transformation. The company had started working on digital transformation. They wanted to do, and I'll talk about this in this innovation. It's called Integrated Digital Shipbuilding. It turned into that program, Integrated Digital Shipbuilding Program, which started with grassroots efforts on how do we do digitalization of our shipbuilding processes. And when you talk about those, that's where my journey started. And when you talk about innovation, I was amazed when the reason why I took the job was I was amazed to see how Newport News was gone into a digital design of nuclear power aircraft carriers, a complete ship design in a digital form, operations of the ship in a digital form, and how we're going to transform the future Ford-class building out of aircraft carriers fully digital, with a commitment the company made that 8081, the CVN 81 would be complete digital with no paper drawings. I mean, that's a huge commitment. An example in there is, how do we deliver today when we construct modules and build ships? And I mean, I don't know if you know, Peter, but aircraft carriers, we call this 100,000 tons of diplomacy that displaces 100,000 tons of water. It's a floating city. That's like a floating airport for Navy. Carries about 180 aircrafts on it. 24 stories high, 5 football fields long, 5 acres, of, we call it sovereignty that floats around. And making that ship traditionally would be using drawings. Everything was drawing. In fact, when we digitally designed the ship, we would print the drawings and the work would go out. Now they have started implementing, visual work instructions. So the planning department creates based on the digital design. They create the work packages that are, here are the 5 steps you got to do, and here's how we do it, and here's the digital design. And we give them on a mobile device. And there they go, start doing their work. So that's one example of it. The second example of is when we construct the ship, the ship delivery happens in compartments, like we deliver compartments to the Navy in terms of completion. In traditional way, the compartments used to be delivered based on, we would compare the physical, what's built to what the design said, and we compare physically to say, hey, did we accomplish everything? And now with this augmented reality app that our team had developed, we would actually just look around and we'll show it to our Navy customer. Look, here's the design and here's the physical, and we map them. And it shows exactly designed to actual build. So that's another example of it. The third example I would say is that in 2019, we were the first, Newport News was the first shipyard in the nation to have 5G infrastructure. Because I knew that 5G is going to be very important going forward as we bring more and more digital designs on our shipbuilders in their mobile devices, that we would need very high speed in terms of design. So think about the things that we want to do in the future is, instead of writing kind of a paper, kind of saying, hey, I have a problem, send it to engineering. We would do a phone a friend in engineering and say, here's the problem I have, and how can you help me solve it right now? So those are the kind of things we're doing. Another example, I would say, we have now gone into additive manufacturing. We printed our first 3D part, a metal part, not plastic, approved by Navy in 2019, and it's being tested on aircraft carrier today. At Ingalls, we have now brought in IT operations technology, where we've taken designs from our PLM tool, and we are now bringing right into a panel line and doing laser cut instead of kind of marking the panel line first and then manually cutting it. So these are some examples of digital innovation that we've had at HII.
And great examples indeed. You also mentioned a little earlier, Bharat, that you oversee technology partnerships. And I'd love to understand a bit more about the ecosystem of technology partners that you've put together and the form that takes, the form that curation takes as well. Talk a bit about that, if you would.
Yeah, so Peter, I've always believed, I'll start off with our cultural, when I joined NNS, was we design, build, and do everything ourselves. Again, the platforms we build, nobody else on this planet can build. I'm going to say, at least in the US, for our Navy customers, because it's so heavy, intensive with, from asset technology perspective, so hard for time to entry into the market. But I believed in partnering externally and internally, and I'll talk about both. Technology partnerships externally is that I know that there is no one partner can do it all or ourselves, and I've always believed that if you want to go far, you need to partner with others. So we have partnered with a lot of technology partners, and I won't name names, but in a design space, in a execution space, in manufacturing execution, in a planning space. So we partner with those partners. We co-innovate with them, and sometimes we have now had two partners become joint with us and create a three-way partnership to co-innovate on where they want to take their product sets based on our needs and others' needs. So we are involved in customer advisory boards. That's how we provide feedback. So that's how we do externally. And again, like infrastructure-wise, 5G and others, we partner externally. Internally, partnership is with our functions. I mean, engineering being our largest function, and manufacturing. But internally also, as I mentioned, we have now have capabilities on AI, ML, big data platforms. I want to learn with our own internally on what they provide to our customers and how we can partner internally to leverage each other's capabilities. So that's how I think my take is on partnership. Without partnership, we would not be moving fast and swiftly.
You've already mentioned a number of important trends, Bharat. You've talked about data analytics, artificial intelligence, machine learning. You talked about the sanctity of 5G and some of the innovations that you are putting in place as a result of that. You talked about zero trust in terms of part of your cybersecurity orientation, just to name a few examples from across this conversation. Are there other trends that particularly excite you that you've not yet mentioned that you'd want to underscore?
Absolutely. Again, I'll tell you two stories. One is, 3 years ago when I was at Newport News, and I always believed in, talent, that you go after talent. Don't try to bring talent where you are, right? So bring work to people, not people to work. In our industry, from technology perspective, I wanted to create an environment where I don't care where the talent is, as long as we are working together, we are interfacing and doing what our customer and our divisions want. So I set a goal of 10% remote work. This was like 4 years ago. It means I would not have an office for a person. I don't care where they are. They have to comply with our requirements. but they could be in any state, could be anywhere. Maybe they come in for the first month and then get educated knowledge and then go back and then work from remotely. And I failed that goal. I achieved only 8%. I kind of took a step back and again, I said, okay, we're not ready with it. Considering that we have a lot of management requires visual inspection, visual management kind of thing, which again, doesn't make sense in technology environment. But anyway, so I let it go. And then comes COVID. And we were forced to work remotely. And I can say that and I'm very proud of my teams, that in less than 30 days, we went from, complete company remote being 1x to 10x in 30 days. And we supported with our technologies. We had to do a few things, but we worked it. My entire staff, other than some operational, was all remote. And I couldn't believe it. We were doing it. Everything was working. We were doing better. People were happier. Okay, not about COVID, but being able to work remotely, et cetera, et cetera. And as we talked about coming back, our CEO says to all of us, he told us that, hey, I know we're coming back, but let's just learn from what we learned from COVID and not bring everything back. If you found something new, we need to stick to it and stay with it. So one of them was remote work. And now 75% of my staff is remote. And we have worked out remote working arrangements where people come and go. But, so what I could not achieve 10%, 75%, we are achieving it. And, as they said, necessity is mother of invention. So that's one of the things I would say. I talked about AR, VR. I'm going to say the future trend is going to be XR and metaverse. And, people know what's going on, how physical and virtual and all that's going to come together from work perspective, social perspective, et cetera, et cetera. So I would say that's going to be big trend. No code revolution is coming. A lot of stuff is happening on integrations and things with low code, no code kind of thing. I think that's going to be big. I never mentioned about quantum computing and nanotechnologies, but I can see that. That's blessing in a disguise, but also it's going to bring threats. So now I got to think through on how I'm going to manage cybersecurity and encryption and whatnot. But we'll have to deal with that. And I think I mentioned about autonomous, and we are doing autonomous today, but I think it's gonna be huge. And last but not least, I would add one, which the trend I see. We talk about IQ, EQ. I think DQ is coming, and DQ is digital intelligence. With all these things happening with artificial intelligence, and there's always some things about social, is this right, is it fair, algorithms, etc. And one of the in digital intelligence is how we're going to deal with social aspects of it, political aspects of it. So I think that's going to play a big role. Well, people are not going to focus on IQ, EQ, but you're going to have to focus on DQ, where digital literacy in the community, in your workforce, how you govern that, all of that's going to play a big role.
Bharat Amin, thank you so much for a very stimulating conversation across a whole range of topics, and fascinating to hear more about how each applies to as complex and interesting a business as Huntington Ingalls Industries. I appreciate you taking time, and thank you so much for a great conversation.
Peter, thank you for giving me an opportunity to share our story. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.